they tried to achieve their ends by working entirely behind the scenes, corrupting and deceiving the public. The aims of such groups may be either good or bad, so far as the public interest is concerned, but their methods are a grave danger to democratic institutions.
We become afraid to open our mouths in our own country. This is our country. We can say what we want.
Cuando te parió y te quitó al mundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú.
We are very, very serious men. But so what'd you think about the movie? First and foremost, just get that out of the way. Opinions.
Well, I watched it for the first time, maybe a couple of days ago, because I just have like an external hard drive that I just have a bunch of movies saved to, and like that's always been like, because it's a Coen Brothers movie. I like Coen Brothers, so I always thought I'd put it out. And like, I think there was that one account that used to be on Twitter, like Ashkenaz who would always would always post about this movie, and I'm like, you know,
yeah, his Avi was Larry Gopnik.
Yeah. So it's I always wanted to put it on and see what it was about, and my impression going into it was, okay, this is probably gonna be the most Jewish movie I've ever seen. And once I finished watching it, I'm like, wow, that was the most Jewish movie I've ever seen in my life.
You enjoyed it though, yeah? Because I really enjoyed it.
No, it's
one of my favorites. Honestly,
it's a good movie. I think there's some depth to plumb regarding the movie, but it's
yeah.
I don't know. I guess brief overview. It's sort of like I don't know, like sort of a modern day Job story.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing to get out of the way, is that it's a retelling of Job. That's what everyone always brings up.
Yeah, so it's like this, like set in the 1950s. I think Minnesota, but it's like it's a nondescript Midwest town, and there's like this Jewish physics professor at the university, and it's like basically a series of horrible events that happen to him. So like his wife wants to leave him for another man. He gets like thrown out of his house. Like one of his students tries to bribe him, and he can't like give him the money back because he can't track him down. He's like getting into a car crash. So it's like a series of events that are, but that befall Larry Gopnik. And the movie's set up where it's like there's these three rabbis, or that he's like trying to meet. He's like trying to get some explanation for like, why is this happening to him? Like, what could it all mean? And maybe we'll save sort of the more descriptive analysis to like later on, but it's sort of the lack of answers that he's getting, and sort of just the inane responses from these rabbis, and like sort of like what's like pulling him forward is there's like this very supposedly very wise elder rabbi who doesn't do pastoral work anymore, and like you can't go see him, but like as Larry Gopnik, as his life falls apart more and more, he becomes more and more desperate to see him. And I won't spill the whole thing here, but I think that sort of just gives people a brief idea of what the movie is. So the most interesting part for me, at like a different level, is like an analysis of like the Jewish psychology, because I think this film is very revealing when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And
it's like it's definitely an interrogation of their own sort of faith, I guess, and their own sort of cultural background, because both the Coen brothers are Jewish. I mean, the name is enough of a tell. The Coen brothers.
Yeah, it's and no, yeah, it is probably the most Jewish movie that's ever been made. Um, and like contrasting with something that's like Fiddler on the Roof, which is like supposed to be like it shows like these shtetl Jews as like happy and carefree, which is really not how uh, Jews are. It's sort of like not even a glamorizing. It's sort of like a mythic, fake view of like Jewish shtetl life. This is a lot more honest. I think the Coen brothers were uh, trying to be realistic with their portrayal of like Jewish psychoses and Jewish neuroses, and while at the same time having a sort of theological bent to it. Um, so like the biggest example is when it comes to like the Jewish psychology has to do with Larry Gopnik's neighbor in my mind,
Mhm.
who's like this brutish Germanic like Midwestern type. You're like
Yeah, I thought that was funny too. I noticed that also.
so it's like it's the whole thing with sort of like the Jewish Gentile, and they like rarely use the word Gentile in the movie. They just
Goy.
they say goy.
They
Oh,
even went so far as to use goy.
the
Yeah, the goy
yeah.
teeth.
Oh, he's a goy. Oh, he's a goy, and it's done in a very dismissive manner. But like I don't know. We were talking about doing like a Yuri Schleskin episode sometime in the future, but there is that dynamic that Schleskin talks about where it's like, the Mercurial and the Apollonian, like the Apollonian,
Yeah, yeah.
like food producing people that would be like the Midwestern Germanic, like the German stock who pull their kids out of school to go hunting and that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah, sort of the honor culture as well comes with the Apollonian consideration
right.
or comparison rather.
So like those, they form the majority of a society. And the Mercurian, who like the Schleskin identifies with Jews, are these like Mercurian middle manager types. So the relationship between those is that the Mercurian Jew sort of sees the Apollonian, depends on the country, but Germanic Midwest Amerikaner as sort of like brutish and like kind of dull, um, but at the same time also like scared of him, right? So it's like
Yeah.
this aloofness, thinking that he's more intellectual than the Apollonian Amerikaner is. And on the flip side, the Apollonian Midwesterner sort of sees the Mercurian Jew as a feminine or effeminate, sort of effete. So that's sort of the dynamic that plays up here. Sort of like because they show the relationship between like the Jew and like the Jewish religious elite with like the rabbis, but it also shows the interrelation between like the Jewish man and the Jewish woman, and also the Jewish Mercurian figure with the Apollonian uh, American Midwesterner. So it's sort of highlighting these relationships that are, and sort of using that to parse out the idiosyncratic quirks of like the Jewish mind.
Yeah. It's funny, like just one thing I want to say, like I watched this movie for the first time a couple years ago, and I kind of forgot about certain details of it, so I had to rewatch it. And I swear before I rewatched it yesterday, uh, I swear it took place in like upstate New York. I totally forgot it was in Minnesota, and that was the funniest thing I guess rediscover for me, because you don't really expect a little town in the Midwest in Minnesota of all places to be basically like a Jewish shtetl, but that's aside the point. I just thought that was just a little bit of humor that I noticed. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean by the religious influence. It's by the religious influence being sort of epitomized by the rabbis. And interestingly enough, the relationship that all the characters in this movie have to the rabbis is one of extreme detachedness. Not in the sense that they view the rabbis with detachment, but that they're physically detached from them. They can't approach them at the best of times, and when they finally can, they're then I guess sort of relationally detached from them because they're completely different from them. They can't relate with them, or they're just not all there. In the head rabbi's case, Marshak. Um, like the whole movie was kind of culminating in that scene where Danny went to talk to Marshak after his bar mitzvah, and the dude just quotes Jefferson Airplane and tells him to be a good boy. It's like the great sage, the head rabbi of the local synagogue, and the dude can't even remember his own name half the time, I bet.
And it's
But
funny
like
because throughout the entire movie, Gopnik is like going to like his, I don't know, work acquaintances or or people that he's friendly with, like other Jews, and they're all telling him, "Oh, go see Marshak, go see Marshak. He's very
yes,
wise." So it's funny at the end. I guess we'll do a spoiler alert. We'll do a spoiler alert here, but I know I'm assuming I'll do a little intro that says this is all spoilers. Don't listen to until you've seen the movie.
oh, it should be assumed,
It should be
man.
assumed.
You're coming into a movie. I mean, a podcast talking about a movie. Of course, they're spoil the movie. That's what it's for. If anyone gets on our case about it, they're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but but it's interesting that Danny is the one to talk to Marshak and not Larry, the father. Larry's the one who was advised to talk to Marshak, wanted to talk to Marshak, and you could even say needed to talk to him. Danny didn't care. In fact, you could kind of tell he didn't want to be in there. The only thing he got out of it was his Walkman. That's what it was. His music player.
Yeah, his Walkman was
Um,
confiscated at Jewish Sunday school, and at the end of the
yeah,
movie, when he meets Marshak, this wise rabbi, the wise rabbi gives it back to him. So
yeah. Um, and it's interesting also that he especially needed the Walkman back because his weed money he kept in the Walkman's cover. So it's just there's a lot of moments like that. There's I guess you could say it's sort of like a critique of organized religion. Sort of like highlighting the hypocrisies and highlighting certain hypocrisies and insufficiencies within it. I definitely think that's part of it because it has to be stressed how autobiographical the movie is for the Coen brothers. It's if I remember correctly, I think they literally were raised in the same town
Oh,
as this
really?
movie takes place in. Yes, they did. They did come from Minnesota. They were born and raised in Minnesota. I can't remember I think it might even be the same town, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that specifically. But it's very very autobiographical. So everything that's kind of happening in the movie, aside from I guess some of the metaphor and allegory, should be taken to some degree as them kind of talking in an indirect way about where they came from. But
yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I
so
guess in that sense, Danny would be some sort of insert or self-insert
yeah,
character.
exactly. Yeah, that's what I thought too. So the fact that Danny kind of the I mean, it's not just Danny, but it's actually like the entire younger generation, like all the young Jews in the movie, were all kind of very irreverent. It wasn't a main part of actually I think it was. It was definitely kind of showcased. Like you remember that scene where they're arguing about Arthur's gambling in the living room and his daughter. I can't remember his daughter's name.
Oh, I can't remember it either. But
Yeah, I
Gopnik's
can't.
daughter.
But she yeah. Larry's daughter comes in, and she and Larry's son then like kind of makes fun of her for saving up for a nose job for a rhinoplasty, right? That's like the classic like Jewish woman hates her big nose, so she wants to get it shaved down a bit to look a little more classically white, you could say, because that is what they end up what their noses end up looking like. Like a good example is Natalie Portman. Like no like Portman is pure Jewish, like pure Jewish, and no one's ever seen her without a nose job. You can only imagine what it used to look like.
I know
But
the horror.
so
But
so the relationship that the young characters in the movie, which as you said, like are probably to varying degrees sort of inserts for the Coen brothers' perspectives on their own childhoods, all had sort of a irreverent, apathetic, or even sort of resentful attitude towards their upbringing, their race, their traditions. Danny was high during his bar mitzvah. Gopnik's daughter wanted to get a nose job and conceal her Jewishness. The other students within the Hebrew school were all, you could say, not they weren't exactly the best students.
Yeah.
You could say not exactly the great paragons of Jewish virtue that I'm sure that I'm sure their parents want them to be.
Yeah, they were sort
You know,
of the assimilating or semi-assimilating. They weren't enthusiastic Jews.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
they're sort of just dragged, like they're a part of the community, but they're, I mean, like all kids almost, like sort of, you know, dragged into the Sunday school, and you know, your parents make you do this and that. So, it's I think it's just sort of a part of, like, you know, assimilating into the American suburbs. He wants to, you know, listen to, I don't know, Jefferson Airplane and other, you know, this movie was like set in the 60s, I guess.
Yeah.
So like he wants to listen to music like that, but he's, you know, because he's got his bar mitzvah portion coming on, he has some like Jewish music. Or some like, or he has like his bar mitzvah portion that he's like just trying to memorize by having it on the record player. And it's funny because Larry
Yeah.
Gopnik listens to like, I don't know, it's like sort of anachronistic Jewish music. I don't know if you noticed that, but Gopnik is like, what, he's like lying down, you know, feeling sorry for himself, and he has some music on. It's like some, I don't know what it would be, like Jewish folk music that sounds like it's from,
Yeah.
you know, 60 years before this movie would take place. Meanwhile, his
Yeah,
son's,
it's all in Yiddish and everything.
yeah, his son's listening to, you know, Led Zeppelin or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting interplay there. So I guess that's just sort of maybe the Coen brothers showing that, like, for this generation of Jews that they were a part of, like they were sort of like in that liminal state where, you know, half assimilated but sort of still growing up through the institutions that, you know, made them, or that, you know, that impressed upon them that they were different to, you know, non-Jews.
Yeah, exactly. So so on one hand, I guess the film is sort of a critique of organized religion, but that's not the interesting part. Um, the interesting part of the movie, I think, is the degree to I mean, this is sort of in the Job angle, right? You know, the Job in the Bible, he was a so he was a favored son of God, and there was sort of a wager put between God and the devil that, um, deprived of all of Job's sort of material possessions, and like his family, his wife, his land, his money, all of that, that he would he would lose his faith. And God's contention is that he wouldn't, because he's just that good of a person, right? So in order to prove it, God takes away everything that he basically gave Job for being so faithful, right? And that's what happens to Larry in this movie. Larry had a lot of good things going for him. It's implied at the very beginning of the movie, and that almost immediately goes to shit.
And it's funny because or it's interesting rather, because the way the movie set up is like an in media res kind of thing where you don't know anything about. I mean, you can make assumptions, but the movie doesn't depict any part of Larry's life up until it starts going to shit. So,
Yeah, exactly.
like, first scene, or one of the first scenes of the movie is his wife saying she wants a divorce, right? So
Yeah.
immediately, you're being shown a man losing everything, and you sort of have to assume what it was before the cameras were rolling, and even.
My assumption, though, is that it was pretty good for him, though. Prior to that, I mean, he had everything going for him. He had a wife, he had kids, he had a job, a relatively prestigious job too. He was well known in his community. I don't think the guy had much to complain about prior to the movie starting.
Oh yeah, no, and it's interesting as well because it's because they don't show any of that. And when Gopnik is talking to, like, let's say the second rabbi, for example, the rabbi asks him, like, "Oh, were you having problems?" And Gopnik's like, no, it was great. Well, I don't know actually, because, you know, this all happened so fast. So not
Yeah.
only like does the, you know, the movie not show what happened or what Gopnik's life was like before this all started happening to him. Gopnik is sort of put in the same position as the audience member or the viewer, where, you know,
Exactly.
Where Gopnik
Exactly. That's my
doesn't even know what to make sense of his life before this all started happening. Like up until second
exactly.
one of the movie, it's all a blur for Gopnik as well, just as it's not shown to the
Yeah.
viewer.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. That's what I think is so interesting about the movie. That Gopnik, and you put it better than I was about to. Gopnik is an audience of his own life. Is an audience member of his own life. Like there's a line. I think it was when he was talking to the second rabbi. Was it? I think I'm almost certain. So he was talking to the second rabbi, the older one. He said, "I don't even know how to react right now. I'm just so confused. Like not like." I'm just confused. Nothing makes sense. I don't understand what's happening. I don't know how I feel. I don't even think I'm mad. I'm just confused. I don't know how to react. That I think is like the titular line of the movie and the most interesting dynamic of it to me because I mean the guy the guy has everything going wrong for him at that point. He has lost his wife. He has lost his kids effectively because he has been sort of coerced into moving out of his own home by his wife's lover. Um, he has lost prestige in his community because he now feels embarrassed around them because of what's happening in his personal life. He feels like he's losing integrity and control over his professional life because the student who bribed him to give him a passing grade in his class, that student's father is like a very rich like lawyer or something like that, and threatens to sue Larry for either taking the money and not giving giving the kid a passing grade, or uh, suing the kid or suing him if he does and he like lets slip about it. So like he basically has to do what he's being told. So he feels like he can't control his professional life anymore. Um, and it only gets worse by the time the movie's over also because it's implied he has a terminal disease, like literally in the second to last scene in the movie. It's implied that maybe his son is about to die right there because the tornado is literally like almost directly on top of the school where his son is. Like but
Well, that's interesting as well
that's
because the first scene of the movie is Larry Gopnik getting like scans in a hospital, it seems, and the movie
yeah, and
does
you think it's total.
and the movie doesn't mention it
Yeah.
ever again up until the very last second, where it seems like Larry Gopnik is professor up for tenure. So Gopnik is told by someone on the tenure committee that I think you're gonna like our decision. So pretty much being told that he's getting the promotion, right? So it seems that maybe a bit of a happy ending. And then that first scene in the movie that wasn't referenced and that I completely forgot about, which I probably was intentional up until the end of the movie, was the fact that maybe Gothic has some underlying disease this whole time that never got brought up until the very end,
Mm-hmm.
where the doctor tells him to come see him because these are concerning scans that I have. So it's sort of like
Yeah.
pulling the rug out from under him, just when he saw a little bit of hope. So it's sort of just the abject, there isn't a happy ending to this. It's just
Yeah.
it's the Job story.
Mhm.
It's just sort of abject misery for
And
Job, and there's no explanation for it. Because the thing about Job
yeah.
is that Job is never given an explanation, and Gopnik is never given an explanation. The
Mm.
rabbis don't give Gopnik an explanation for what's going on, and the emotion that Gopnik feels, in addition to being sad about what's happened to him, what's more salient than that is just the abject confusion he feels because nothing makes
Yes.
sense in his life anymore, and things keep happening to him. Like when you think it's making a turn, something like that happens, like we were just talking about, and just things that don't make sense. Where like Gopnik gets into a car crash, and at the exact same time he gets into a car crash, the guy who was cucking him with his wife, he gets into a car crash and dies. So
But he
yeah,
dies.
so like,
Yeah.
and then his wife sort of like takes him back just right before his son's bar mitzvah. So it's so for Gopnik, like nothing's making sense. He's like seeing patterns. He doesn't know if that means anything. He's being told stories by the rabbis about some Jewish dentist who found Hebrew letters inside the goys' teeth, and and that's like a funny scene that maybe we can get a little bit into, but it's it's the abject confusion. I think is important to impress upon people because it's not just sort of like this. I don't know, because that's what makes it a Jewish movie. There's no like sort of because something like I don't know if you've ever seen Dallas Buyers Club, but
No, I haven't.
there's like it's like I'll contrast that with this where it's like a guy gets AIDS, right? So it's like, oh, poor him, poor him. And that's another example of like a poor him movie. But the difference is that in Dallas Buyers Club, he dies and like or he's dying and like the end is like, you know, trying to redeem him by like all this work he's doing in the community and trying to give it a happy ending, even if it is tragic. This isn't that. This is just shitty things are happening to you, and none of it's gonna make sense, and there's no happy ending, and there's not even a resolution. It's
Yeah.
and that's what makes it interesting, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's more than there isn't a happy ending. It's that it's probably getting even worse by the end of it. It's like when the movie ends, it's like none of the characters are better off, and you've only seen what can imply that it's probably going to get worse for them all. But so like that. So I don't know if I have a lot to say on that specifically. What I was talking about specifically with how it's not understandable, like how you were talking about how it's just like bad stuff is happening, no one really understands why, you kind of just deal with it and take it as it comes, but there's no like, I guess you could call redemption found in it. It's sort of just presented as it is. That's the most interesting part of it to me, and specifically the relationship that Larry has to his place in all of this. He is an audience member in his own life. You see it in, like, remember the diner scene, the diner scene where he's talking to his wife and his wife and her lover, and they're like discussing the
Oh
living
yeah, yeah.
arrangements, and it's the scene where he ultimately basically gets forced out of his own home. He's not an active member in his life. Almost, he doesn't. He he's essentially going through the motions, you could say, put it kind of tritely, but to the point where when he's presented with something that should make any reasonable guy just fucking lose his mind, he just kind of goes back. He can't really do anything more than just stutter and kind of just end up agreeing. Um, and that's sort of him. That's sort of the story in a sense. Like,
Yeah, he has no
you're
agency,
not.
essentially.
Yeah, he has no agency, and you get the feeling that he almost doesn't want it. What he wants is for life to kind of just work and to understand things. Like, that's another thing that's interesting in the movie that does it like that. That isn't taken directly from Job, you could say, is that he's a physics professor. He's someone who deals very very strongly in his discipline with what you could call objective facts. Like, you can get all meta about it and say like, oh, but like science is built upon all sorts of assumptions, therefore he's not dealing with with like objective facts, which the movie itself kind of does by talking about like the uncertainty principle and Schrodinger's cat and so forth. But his inclination is originally that life needs to be understood, and that if you understand things and you kind of act well enough within the context of understanding things, which is what he was talking, which is sort of what he was belying in that one scene where he was crying about not being an evil man. He's like, I'm not an evil man. Like, the implication of that is he doesn't understand why why this is happening to him. He doesn't deserve it.
Right.
It's like there's a cause and effect in his mind. There's always a cause and effect, and he doesn't see the cause, so he doesn't understand the effect, right? So there's a very intentionally made statement on the part of the Coen brothers, and him having this kind of perspective on life, that everything has a cause and effect. You understand the causes, you understand the effects, and you act in concert with those, and you kind of get something out of life at that point, right? The statement is in that scene where he's talking about the uncertainty principle, where at a certain resolution you can't really predict the behaviors of fundamental particles you can't even do it with larger things like with the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, is saying that like even if you better way to put it is saying that like if you do think this way, if you do have sort of this, I guess you could call like physicists or scientists a rationalist approach to life, like Larry does, you're liable to get fucked maybe.
Right.
Because ultimately you're gonna get bashed in the head by by your dead lover, by your dead excuse me, by your wife's dead lover in a dream. It's like you're just gonna be taken over by extraneous forces that you can't understand because they either can't be understood, they don't care about being understood, or they're actively belying you understanding them,
And
acting in spite of it.
the interesting thing about making him a physics professor is that like like you said before, like he'll talk about like Schrodinger's cat, and he's like talking to the student, and the student failed because he didn't understand the math part, but the student's saying, "Oh, but I understood the stories," and Gopnik goes, "Yeah, no, but the math is the only reason it makes sense," and then he sort of admits, "I don't even understand the cat," so it's like the whole thing is like what he does is like the math, like him thinking this all has to make sense because the math works out. Even though in his own mind, at a conceptual level, the cat doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of the same thing with regards to his life. Like the underlying, he's married, he has kids, he has a nice house, he has a nice job. All the underlying math works, but he doesn't understand the cat, which is like,
Yeah.
how that manifests, in the real world. So it's sort of a similar thing, but that's sort of used as a parallel between the disconnect between what Gopnik thought his life was and the things that are now happening to him. I see that, being used as a metaphor, or the physics, Schrodinger's cat, all that stuff. I see that used as a metaphor for the larger plot.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Like him sort of like whenever he's going to the rabbis, like remember when he's like begging that like super frumpy, like very manly voiced Jewish secretary at the synagogue to speak to Marshak. He's like crying to her. He's like, I just want to understand. I need help. I just want to understand. He's someone to explain this to me. Like he wants to know why it's happening. He wants to know the math in a sense.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at. It's like it's like he doesn't understand what's actually happening to him, but he feels like there's some more arcane, like sort of calculus of good and bad deeds. You could say karma if you want to. Like that's a typical way of putting it. There's like a calculus of karma underneath his life that he doesn't see but must exist to explain what's happening to him, and he's hoping that Marshak can explain it to him.
And then of course, like the secretary goes over, and like you see a glimpse of Marshak, and then the secretary comes back and goes, "Oh, he's busy." And
It's like he didn't look busy to me.
Gopnik, has like this whiny voice, and he's like, he's desperate. And it's a very funny movie as well, and it's because it's like you see in the desperation there is still like a humor there, just in the way he's saying things. Like another funny line I like, you were talking about the nose job scene before. At the end, Gopnik's like, "No one in this house is getting a nose job." So sort of like, I there's just a lot of scenes like that it's a funny movie, because we're looking at it like I don't know, a thematic or a metaphorical or a theological level. But if you're a grug brain, you can just watch it because it's funny.
It's just a good movie regardless. Yeah. Like it really is. There's a lot. I think there's a tendency to dismiss the culture productions of our friends the Jews, but which more a lot of times may be warranted. But this is one of the good ones, I think, and it's definitely more self-aware. Also,
yeah, I'll extend that to the Coen brothers as a whole. One of the good ones.
Yeah, definitely. Like just to speak briefly on like their other films, like No Country for Old Men. Like No Country for Old Men. Fucking what was that other movie? I love how I bring up their other movies, and I'm trying to think of their other movies I've seen, but I can't bring any to mind. But I've seen so many of them. Give me just a second. Yeah, The Big Lebowski. That's another one. Like like the Big Lebowski, the Big Lebowski.
Miller's Crossing is another one I've seen, but
Yeah, Mills Crossing, but No Country for Old Men is the one I thought of at first because it's probably the best example. Is not as being a not Jewish movie in comparison to A Serious Man, which it very much is. Um, their cultural horizons go very far beyond just being like two Jewish guys.
yeah, they're
And
not.
that's
Yeah, they're not navel gazing. Cause it's interesting. Cause another movie that I like of theirs is Fargo. So
oh yeah, that's what I was trying to think of.
yeah,
Yeah,
so they're
Fargo.
able to like look at. I mean, this is a sign of a good filmmaker. They're able to look at, I don't know what you call it, subjectivities that are not, just themselves. They're not navel gazers. So the fact that like something like Fargo, I mean, that's that's Midwesterner, uber Midwesterner point of
Yeah,
view.
I don't think.
But that
What was there a single Jew in all of Fargo?
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a very earnest movie. It wasn't Fargo wasn't trying to paint a cynical picture. It was a cynical movie, but it wasn't trying to paint a cynical picture about like about the put upon or the backwards goyim. It was just saying that some people are huge pieces of shit basically
Yeah.
is the sort of the message of Fargo. Not that the non-Jews are pieces of shit, which you can actually infer from a good amount of popular media today if you actually look into some of the subtext.
Yeah, and it's and I say that because it's uh it goes to show that like the attempts to make this movie, for lack of a better word, Jewy, are like deliberate. If they can make a movie like Fargo, which is the most Germanic, genteel, Midwesterner movie that you can imagine, the sort of the Jewish themes and attitude, like everything in here is deliberate. But that goes that's to their credit as filmmakers. I think another. I was just about to recall something. Oh, I was thinking about the. 2 points, I guess. One of the funny things about the movie is that it's revealed throughout the movie that like more and more of the characters with like upper middle class professions are Jewish. Like throughout the movie, it'll be like he'll go to a lawyer, and like someone and you could assume that the lawyer is Jewish, and then like he'll say that like, oh, your son's bar mitzvah is coming up, and then towards the end of the movie, the person on the tenure committee who's been like the source of anxiety from the entire time tells them like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, beautiful bar mitzvah. So it's sort of showing like all these people
Yeah.
with like upper middle class gigs are even though they pose these sort of they're these sources of anxiety for Gopnik, they're simultaneously part of his community as well, which is an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic where it's like, because it's not revealed that the tenure committee person is Jewish up until the very end, and then that's when the audience is sort of given like he's he's one of them, so he can they can commiserate, so it's there's two levels to that where it's just sort of, I don't know, maybe Ethel Cohen or Joel and Ethan Cohen having a bit of a joke about like this sort of I don't know, the Mercurian jobs that the Jews have in like a Midwestern college town, dentist, lawyer, professor. And another part of that.
Just to interject really quick, the town in A Serious Man, St. Louis Park, it is the town that they grew up in.
Gotcha. So yeah, so what we were talking about, the autobiographical nature of it with Danny, that's that's probably true. But so that's the first interesting prong of that. The second interesting prong is that there's this tension between, like, it's not like an evangelical Christian church where like there's a whole lot of hugging and if you're part of the same community, it's very obvious, I would guess, because you're a part of the community with this tenure committee person, but at the same time he's this massive source of anxiety for you throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
And it's not revealed at the end that he's your son had a beautiful bar mitzvah, and it's like a bit of relief for Gopnik.
Yeah, that's one thing that should be kind of said. I don't know if it's a point that the movie intends to make, but like there's a lot of romanticism for, I guess you could say, like small town, sort of like peasant or rural life nowadays,
Right.
which a lot of it is warranted. But um, it should be noted that the people who you're stuck with in those small towns are sort of your world, and if your little town is dysfunctional, then it's sort of that's sort of your lot in life at that point, which you can kind of take from the fact that, like you said, like this guy is part of his community, but he's also like a massive source of anxiety for him. Whereas nowadays, most of people's anxiety comes from the fact that they're not part of a community.
Right.
That most of the frictions in their lives come from very amorphous and very very abstract systems that they're beholden to but can't touch or understand in any meaningful way. um but you mentioned like the evangelical church, like the huggy like evangelical churches. There is an instance of that in the movie, and that's the young rabbi, mind you, like that's an
Right.
important detail. um the the young rabbi has what he the way that he's. Okay, just to preface it, so Larry goes to talk to the young rabbi first. He kind of goes up the ladder,
Yeah.
or tries to go up the
The
ladder. Talks
junior
to the young, then the
rabbi.
middle, then
The junior rabbis are the
yeah,
lowest rung that they have.
yeah, exactly. Um, but the junior rabbi sort of doesn't really know what he's talking about in a sense. Like he doesn't really wait for Larry to finish, so he gives him some totally like unactionable advice, and that ends up kind of being insulting, or rub salt in the wound a little bit further. Um, but what he tells him is, you need to change your perspective. You need to learn how to see Hashem and Hashem and everything. You need to learn how to see God's will and everything. And he tells him something, and what he's telling him is basically indistinguishable from what you'd hear in like any modern evangelical church
Yeah,
almost.
because it's
And
interesting because he is like he's like a very Americanized Jew. So the advice he's
yeah,
giving is
he
like,
is the youngest of them.
yeah, so the advice he's giving is like this new thought, new age, the power of positive thinking kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that thinking that has sort of suffused really all religion in America, to the point where most religions in this country don't have a meaningful difference between one another. Like I remember when was this exactly? I think it was in 2017. I saw this video of Richard Spencer at some kind of conference, and this Jewish guy comes up and he's like, "I'm a Jew, and my religion is about being radically inclusive, and you're about being radically inclusive." And he said, like, will you read Torah with me, or something like that, something really gay like that. But like Judaism isn't about being radically inclusive. It actually is about
It's
being radically
yeah, it's
exclusive.
the exact opposite.
Um,
It's
yeah.
it's
So
it's
so the
not
the
a
fact,
it's a I mean this is people that listen to this probably get the gist, but like it's not a proselytizing religion. It doesn't
yeah,
it's a tribal thing. So yeah, no. I just wanted to
mm,
say it's like the exact opposite of But to your point,
yeah, exactly. So
the trend is to be liberal and inclusive. So regardless of what these religions actually are per
yeah, and
se.
and yeah, exactly. So and the statement that's made by the fact that it's the youngest rabbi saying that is that this is sort of the direction things are going. This is the way in which the religion will end up kind of fractionating, or dissolving, and cease to be itself anymore. People like Larry, people like the older rabbis, they kind of are forgotten and then replaced by people like the younger rabbi, whose religion, while nominally Judaic, is sort of just the American hodgepodge, and by his son, who doesn't really have any truly Jewish cultural signifiers that he holds dear. All the music, like you made the comparison with the music. Larry listens to like Yiddish folk music, and his son listens to like Jefferson Airplane, or Jefferson Starship rather.
Yeah, and it's no, that is a good point. That's sort of like how everything is reduced to the sort of like liberal cosmopolitan, power of positive thinking, feel good, schlock, to use a Jewish word. But
Yeah.
another thing I want,
It's interesting also that it wasn't in a city. It wasn't in like your typical cosmopolitan environment. Provided St. Louis Park is a suburb of Minneapolis, so it's not super far removed, but it's there's something subtle there in that it's happening everywhere. It's everywhere in this country, and it's not just a fault of the internet. This was happening long before it. The cultural horizons of the American cosmopolitan class is not it's very old. It's been going on for a long time, and it touches everywhere. And the internet it didn't require the internet to do that. It was doing it long before the internet. The internet has if anything just accelerated it, hasn't created it.
I agree. One thing I wanted to touch on was the final scene of the movie, and sort of get your take on it, because it ends on a very powerful note. I feel during the storm. Sort of wanted to get your take on it, but Danny, it's after his bar mitzvah, and this scene is concurrent with Gopnik getting a call from the doctor saying he wants him to come in because of some concerning scans. During the same time, Danny is in Jewish Sunday school, and it's a tornado that's blowing through the town, and he has to run outside, I guess, to get to some shelter that's in a different building.
Yeah, the basement of the synagogue they were going to go to.
Right. So it's and the final scene in the movie is just him trying to get there's this bully weed dealer kid who's trying to beat him up because he owes him $40 or $20 or whatever. So at the end of the movie, because he got his Walkman back, he can pay the bully drug dealer kid. But he tries to call out his name to pay him, but he's too busy staring at this tornado that's quite literally just down the street. And the final scene of the movie is just Danny staring at this tornado that's down the street, and so he just cuts the credits. And my read on that was that just trying to in a visceral way, sort of the sort of awe-inspiring, sort of maybe sublime power of God, which is sort of what the movie, even though it sort of plays with the Jewish neuroses at the beginning, the end of the movie is sort of all about that. Because you have, Gopnik going through all these things in his life, and you think it's turning around, and, oh, look, no, you're actually sick, and we need you to come to the hospital. And so that's the last thing that happens to Gopnik, and the last thing that happens to Dan is he's just staring at this powerful force of nature, this tornado coming down the street. So the final bit of the movie is sort of all these sort of human affairs are, actually minuscule in comparison to the awe-inspiring nature of God, from this from this movie's point of view, which, is responsible for these, powerful forces of nature, and for illness, and for all these sorts of things that should humble you as a human being, as a Jew, in the movies, from the movie's point of view.
Yeah, a Christian would take the same meaning from it, because
right.
I mean, the Old Testament is sacred to them also. But something to, you're asking my take on this. I think that my take doesn't really matter so much, because the meaning is very clear. Because I don't know if you know this, but in the book of Job, God appears to Job at the end of it as a tornado.
Oh, you know what? I haven't read Job in a while. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah, it is. At the Job is, if I remember correctly, he's sitting on an ash heap, I think. He's sitting on an ash heap, and then God appears to him as a funnel of wind, I think the Bible says, or at least that's what I read. It was called a wind funnel.
Well, that just means that
the power of a whirlwind.
That just means that I've read the scene correctly. So
your take is
well done,
exactly
well done,
correct.
Enzo. But I'm still gonna. Let's not denigrate my laurels.
Here, we'll give you the clap. There you go. Yeah, but that is exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's not a genius. Fucking. That's not a genius level take to see, but it's interesting that I just wanted to talk about how the movie is sort of about personal issues, right? And that's sort of all these personal things that happen. And
well, I don't really think it's. I'll disagree. I don't think the movie is about personal things. Most of the movie is personal. The nature of most of the problems in Larry's life are personal. Up until his chest X-ray, which implies a terminal disease, which I mean, it's only his disease, but it's not a personal problem necessarily. You know what I mean? It's not like a problem with your personality. It's a problem of nature. It's a freak event of nature that that he may have a terminal disease. It's a freak event of nature that there's a tornado bearing down on his son's Hebrew school. Um, but I think it's just about sort of the nature of life's problems in general. Like there's almost like an anarchy in how all these things present themselves at the same time. How unrelated personal problems can how the personal problems themselves, all as many as he has, all appear at the same time, even though the different personal problems themselves are unrelated to one another. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's less about the personal problems being put in place by God, I think, even though that is a way to look at it, and a valid way, and probably a correct way to look at it also. But more beyond that, it's just that there's a degree to which life behaves in a way that can't be reckoned with or understood, because it will, in a sense, just do what it will. And regardless of the form that a given problem or set of problems takes, there's still problems of life and sort of fall under the same umbrella, if you know what I mean.
No, I get you. My point was to mean that the effect of that scene is um, that it sort of diminishes or I don't know, deaccentuates the earlier part of the movie. What I mean is that something like Larry getting into a car accident seems less significant now when you compare it to uh, the end of the movie, which is sort of, I feel, sort of the point of like Job is to, like, oh, all these horrible things, but then they're minuscule in comparison to God, right? So I feel that's just sort of the
Yeah.
point of that. Like, it's the effect of that scene. I don't mean personal problems as in they're not uh significant. I mean personal problems
I see
in
what you
that
mean.
they're problems for Larry Gopnik, right?
Mm.
Whereas
Yeah, I get
whereas
what you
something
mean.
like mortality, or that's a universal problem.
Yeah.
That's all I meant
Yeah,
by that.
I guess I jumped the gun a little bit with my rebuttal, but it's one thing that should be said about like the problems in all them in the movie, right? Is from there's like the human perspective kind of way of thinking about it. It's like to like a single human, there's no difference between a tornado and a gunshot wound and a terminal disease, right? They all sort of have the same resolution in a sense. They will all result in your death. From Larry's perspective, it's all just the same rush. It's all just judgment. It's all judgment. It's all hellfire and brimstone. And what binds all of it together is that none of it makes any fucking sense to him, and it probably never will. So I think that's sort of the commonality of all his trials and tribulations in the movie, is that they can't be understood. Why is his wife cheating on him? I don't know. I don't know. Like she's just a piece of shit. You know, why did he marry a piece of shit? I don't know. He liked her or something. You know, like it's just all the problems in his life have like a long sort of linearity in time that can't be understood, and they all have this convergence of catastrophes in his life at that one time, and ultimately, going back to the how he's a physics professor, and that's his discipline, and that's representative of his discipline and his outlook in life. He wants to understand. That's his impulse. That's his primary reaction, his desire in the face of adversity, is to understand, right? But that does not matter. It doesn't matter whether or not he understands why the tornado is hitting at that moment. It doesn't matter why he understands why his brother is running from the cops at the same time that his wife is cheating on him, at the same time he's dealing with professional problems at work, at the same time his son is having problems with having problems with his faith, I guess you could say, is the larger way to put it. Like there's no explanation for that, no rational explanation that can be understood. It simply happened, and it has to be dealt with.
Right, and it's you get this the feeling that Gopnik hasn't examined his life up until this point, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you a lot of this like it's sort of an odd thing to dissect, but like a sort of a running theme is about like a different point of view. Like there's this like neighbor woman who like invites Gopnik into her apartment to like smoke weed and have sex with her or something like, like that's his impression. And like they're smoking weed and like he starts talking about like, oh, it's a matter of like perspective, things along those lines. Um, and because of like stuff like that, you do get the impression that Gopnik has not examined his life up until this point, and maybe this is why this has happened to him because he hasn't examined his life up until this point, or conversely, there's actually no reason. There's no rhyme or reason to what's happening to him, and this isn't a message to start examining his life. But I just wanted to get that out there because I do feel there was sort of like a running theme that up until the end you think could be the answer that Gopnik is looking for, that he hasn't considered his own life up until this point. So maybe this is what Hashem wants. He wants me to examine my life up until the end, where he gets a call from the doctor. You come in and you realize, oh no, it's not about perspective. It's not this feel good thing where his brother tells him all the great things he has in his life, and Larry, looking at his life for the first time, realizes how good he actually has it despite all these setbacks. No, that's actually, it's like a bit of a red herring. Right at the end, uh, Doctor calls him. There's no, that's actually that's not what Hashem is telling him. Then there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. And that's why I enjoy this movie so much because it teases you with like certain uh, it doesn't do like the cheap thing where like it's a bait and switch where like there's a gun on the wall but they don't shoot it. It's not that kind of cheap bait and switch. It's like a thematic bait and switch, and you're sort of put in the same position as Gopnik where you're also trying to figure out um like what's going on and what's the meaning behind all this, and then you sort of with Gopnik because Gopnik and the audience, like we said before, share a similar point of view. You sort of come to the same realization that oh, there actually is no point to any of this besides the awe-inspiring power of God, because through the trickery of filmmaking, that 30-second scene at the beginning where Larry's getting tested, Gopnik forgot about it, the audience forgot about it. It's not brought up until the very end. So I don't know. That's just my concluding thoughts on the whole thing. I don't know if you have any more to say, but it's a very interesting movie, and it's got cerebral portions. It's got parts that are just funny that you can enjoy. I'll let you get the last word, but I'd recommend it highly.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it too. Like I said, it's just a good movie. It's and yeah, there's a lot that you could say on the Jewishness of the movie. I think that the movie doesn't have anything good to say about Jewishness, honestly. It there's if at best the Jewishness, at best the statement that the movie's making on the Jewishness of it is that just that these people have it in common, and that kind of gives them some grounding in their life. That's maybe, and even then that's a little bit in question. Like we were talking about the dude, the guy on the tenure committee. He's Jewish also, but and he's in Larry's community, but he's a source of like an enormous anxiety for him. Um, I'll say one more thing on sort of the understanding problems in life. There's a really modern sort of inclination. I don't know if maybe calling it modern isn't exactly accurate, because it's sort of been a thought, I think, in the back of everyone's heads basically for as long as people can think. Like if you can understand something, then you can identify the cause, and you can counteract the cause before it causes the problem, right? um the movie, I think, says it doesn't work that way. That there's always going to be things that you and your limited human scope in life aren't going to be able to see, and aren't going to be able to see before they happen. And even if you could do something prior to them happening, and that's a big if, to prevent the problem, um, it's not likely that you were going to in the first place. Like, Larry could have known that his wife was going to cheat on him, but what is he going to do? Larry could know that that his son is doing marijuana, and to the point where he's just so irreverent that he'll do it during his bar mitzvah. He could know all these things. He could know that his brother's a criminal and on the run from the cops. He could know all these things. He could do something about them. Except at that point, what is he gonna do? It's this endless fucking spiral into cope, I guess you could call it, coping with one's inadequate amount of time in life, coping with one's inadequate circumstances in life, coping with one's inadequate body. Like a really powerful manifestation of this phenomenon is like sort of the health industry, the modern health industry. Like people know that there's ways in which you can live that will increase health outcomes. It will make you live longer. It will make you less likely to get a disease, et cetera, et cetera. So they become obsessive, and they look into absolutely every single facet of their health that they can, and they'll optimize their diets, they'll optimize their training, they'll optimize their every habit for the purpose of being healthy, whatever that means to them, right? But ultimately, they're still going to die. Ultimately, it's just cope. So I guess there's kind of a message of saying that maybe coping's just making it hurt a little bit more. Cope's the salt in the wound, maybe. But that's just something I took from it.
Cuando te parió y te quitó al mundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú. Busca otro amor, ajalba otras puertas, espera otro ardor, que para mí sos puerta, espera otro ardor, que para mí sos puerta. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú.